there is a palpable sense people fear that they're going to be left behind if they don't adopt AI-based software development life cycles. And my favorite kind of call to get from a customer is, we needed an AI win, and you really delivered one.
And welcome to the Startup Innovators podcast, where we look at some of the hottest growth companies on the planet. And we've got an exciting one today. My guest is Anand Kulkarni in the house today. Anand, how you doing?
Hey, great to be here, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm so excited because we're going to take a story of a very smart guy who started in the Combinator incubator. We're going to learn some experience about that, has worked his way to be a entrepreneur and startup guy multiple times over, has raised a lot of capital, and has taken a company that I was very familiar with and pivoted to a really big opportunity where the timing is perfect. And that's the company CoreStory. He's on a mission, as I interpret it, to entangle the world's most tangled code. And he's going to use AI to do it. So if you like detective stories, you used to watch Columbo or a CSI Miami. If you're a little bit of a tech nerd like I am, this is kind of an investigative process using AI to figure out where intelligence is secretly waiting to be discovered. But we're going to give a quick intro on Anand first. So after earning degrees in physics, mathematics, and industrial engineering at Cal Berkeley, I guess he's not a very smart guy, as well as earning a National Science Foundation Research Fellowship, Anand co-founded LeadGenius, as well as Crowdbotics, which we just talked about a moment ago, and which pivoted into his newest venture, CoreStory. And very exciting. Congratulations. In October, I guess just a couple of weeks ago, you closed on a fairly large, I think the public note was $32 million series venture capital raise. So congrats.
Thanks. Yeah, Tim, it's been a great journey, and it's great to be in the position we're in. So,
Well, Anand brings the perspective of a founder who's actually built AI and deep tech. Not everyone who says they're an AI has actually done that. He's worked with large enterprises and small, and he's now defining kind of an evolving category. I guess we could call it code intelligence, for lack of a better word. And the secret here, I guess the takeaway for a layperson is that, for like me, is that old code isn't code, just code, but it's knowledge waiting to be tapped and repurposed into, as Michael Saylor would say, new energy. So, first question, Anand, just love to start off with Crowdbotics. I think that's part of the story. It's part of your personal story, and it's part of the evolution of where we are today with CoreStory. So I'd love to find out, why did you start Crowdbotics? And at what point, based on what you were doing there, did you realize, hey, there's a whole nother opportunity moving into the legacy software side with very large enterprises, and trying to figure out where this mysterious code, if it could be unraveled and discovered and repurposed, how that opportunity came to be?
yeah, great question. So let's go back in time a little bit. So I'll tell you how we spun out CoreStory. We're actually a spin out from Crowdbotics, and how we went from running actually a decently large scale development system into a pure AI company. Going back to where we started, Crowdbotics had the idea that we could figure out ways to automate big parts of the software development lifecycle. We had an idea that we would need information, data, and really a lot of information about practical, real world software systems in order to understand how to automate big parts of the software development lifecycle. The best way to get that kind of data is actually from real development activity. So Crowdbotics was a development marketplace. We helped scale, plan, and run software projects end to end, and we use technology to accelerate big parts of that process. First, by coming up with collections of components that you could stitch together, then by using classical natural language processing techniques to plan out requirements. And then ultimately, we ended up with a system that could automate big portions of the planning of requirements for software applications. We're doing this at some scale, helping a good number of teams get their initial software applications built. What we started to see, though, was that a lot of folks were showing up and asking about whether it was possible to use that software that we had built directly. Were there ways for us to figure out ways to apply it to other kinds of systems, things like existing large enterprise code bases? When we looked at the market, we realized that we were actually sitting on a relatively unique opportunity. Most of the existing foundation models that exist today are unable to really understand very large real world enterprise code bases. And it's for many of the same reasons that you have described. It is a little bit like an investigative process when you are sitting on code that's been built over many decades by many different people who have cycled in and out of an organization. You've got spaghetti code, you've got code that spans multiple software systems, multiple repositories. You've got information that's undocumented and that's inside institutional or tribal knowledge. And you really have a lot of places where people don't have a good idea of what their existing software does. That's a big problem.
Sounds like you need to get on that new air traffic control uh, process they're going through.
Well, ATC and I think a lot of systems are representative of what we actually face as a society, the real world problems, right? We are running as an industry and as a world on this huge amount of legacy code in production. And the way I talk about this, ATC and airlines are actually a good example. There have been some famous failures from airline scheduling systems in the last 2 years. All of us have been affected by them, actually, where people are sitting due to a scheduling misfire somewhere in somebody's COBOL system. And really, COBOL, a language that was invented, before I was alive, is still being used in.
I took a COBOL class in college, so
Yeah,
let's.
it's still running, deep in the bowels of current systems, our healthcare systems, our finance systems, on systems that we all rely on every day. And so we don't often think about these enterprise code bases until we see that they stop working. And that happens all too often. So we have this obligation, this pressure of society to get good at this fast. So we were talking about Crowdbotics. When we saw this opportunity and we realized that we were sitting on one of the best ways to think about requirements, we decided to spin out CoreStory to help take the technology that we had developed and bring it out to the groups that needed it. And so that was an approach that we ended up taking that had a lot of traction in the market. When we talk to our enterprise customers today, we hear consistently everyone is sitting on more legacy code than they know what to do with. They hear from us for the first time that they don't have to hire the team of detectives that you historically would have to hire one of the big consulting shops to
Right.
sit down and read through all that code. You can
Yeah.
instead take an AI system, reverse engineer all of your code, and get back out an understanding of what that code is. And that's a powerful shift in how you
Yeah.
can approach these problems. So that's a short version of how Core Story was born, and that was just before the round we did. Uh,
So are there two different companies now? Is there Crowdbotics and CoreStory, or did?
yeah, so
Okay.
Crowdbotics actually is now a company called Experts LLC, and
Oh, okay, cool.
continues to scale up. And Core Story, of course, is uh, the uh, the new venture.
Well, I know this is way, way before your time, but this would have been perfect for the Y2K problem. Everything was going to fall apart. I remember consultants coming in saying the world was going to end. There's all this legacy code no one can figure out. They can't change the clocks back. And today you sit back and say that would be ridiculous. We'd have that problem fixed pretty quickly.
I was alive during that time. You could see it in my beard, and I remember, like you do, right? Everyone was wondering right around midnight, did we get
Yeah.
the code fixed in time? And it's funny, right? 25 years later, that look, we really still haven't figured out as a society how to safely manage the gigantic amount of legacy systems that we still deal with and still
Yeah.
rely. And so there's a bit of a moral imperative and a societal imperative to get this right. Either we can figure out how to deal with all this legacy code, understand what it does, and figure out how to safely modernize it, transplant it, or use AI to manage it,
Yeah.
or we will keep seeing failures over and over again.
Well, here's the thing. When you untangle all this and reverse engineer and then document it, so now you have something that you can do something with moving forward. Besides just, fixing it so it's functional, are you able to glean knowledge out of this code that can be repurposed as another software application? Like you discover a new idea within this net of mismatched code that was created over 20 years. Because that would be very exciting. Moreover, if you had the ability, I'm sure it's intellectual property with each enterprise you're working on, but if the AI could take that knowledge set and figure out a way to take this old code and make it into something beautiful, I don't know if that even comes across or you just want to start from scratch these days.
No, actually, Tim, you've nailed why this is such an exciting transformation because in many cases, people look at core story and the intelligence model when they start and say, well, okay, I'm using this to modernize, right? But
Yeah.
as they get a specification out from the system and it's in the language that they can talk to,
Yeah.
just like they can talk to ChatGPT, suddenly they realize, well, actually, I can start doing all these other things that aren't just modernization. So, yes, we do, of course, help a good number of customers do what we call forward engineering, which is taking the existing software code that they've got, turning it into a spec, building tests, and then turning it into a new software system in a modern framework. But that's just the tip of the iceberg for what you can do.
Okay.
Also do the kinds of things that you're talking about, where you can ask questions about not just one application, but a set of applications. Things that you wanted to ask about your enterprise code estate, but you really couldn't because you didn't have the ability to ask business questions to a piece of code. You can ask those questions via core story. So one example is you can ask, hey, I have got 5,000 legacy applications. How many of those applications are doing the same thing and can be shut down?
Yeah.
How many of those applications are actually relevant for what I'm trying to do next? How
Yeah.
many of those applications could be consolidated and modernized together? You could do the kinds of things that you're talking about where you can say, well, look, why don't you find all the parts of my code that could be put together into a new application and figure out which pieces of this tech can be used for initiative X. Those are the kinds of things that we see our enterprise customers do when they're sitting on a new way to understand their code estates.
Now,
But of
can you do take the are you able to use this to do an initial audit or assessment to maybe show the potential client, look, very, very quickly, we just identified 5 key areas that we also, by the way, are seeing consistent with other clients. It's a traditional pattern. Are you able to go do that quickly and kind of prove yourself before you engage in this?
So we don't share info between customers, but we do engage in the way that you're describing. So
Yeah, yeah,
typically customers start with what we call a value sprint here at CoreStory.
right.
They sit down, they turn on CoreStory, they connect it into some software code bases that they've got, and we pull out initial information that they can use to understand what they are sitting on. And it's actually quite robust. We take it down to
Yeah,
the user story, the acceptance criteria, the architectures, the flow of information. And for comparison, for most enterprises who look at a system like this, they tell us that their historical best alternative to understanding all of the requirements of their existing software would be to hire a very large consulting firm who would take 6 months to several years and who would charge them millions of dollars to
well, the
plan.
irony is they were the culprits of the legacy code over the past decades anyway, right?
And I think you're seeing that some of these folks are moving along with the program, right? So we see this pattern often that actually the best consulting teams in the world are helping enterprises adopt solutions like CoreStory, and we're obviously very proud to work with some of these guys. But many more of them have been the only best approach that could be taken. And for them, I think there's a real imperative to adopt solutions like this
Yeah.
or be left behind by the market.
So they are both friend and foe, I guess, depending upon perspective.
I think that's the right way to think about it. And of course,
Yeah,
we have great partnerships with a number of fantastic system integrators um, with whom we are able to help their customers accelerate the way that
yeah,
they modernize existing code bases. Um, but of course, there are a lot of system integrators out there in the world, and there's a lot of consulting shops in the world. And I think that is an industry that is being fundamentally rewritten by AI from the bottom up, even today.
can they white label the technology, or is that
We
some
create
or they partner with you?
They typically partner with us. So
Okay,
we end up going to market with them. And the value proposition for system integrators that use CoreStory versus the ones that don't are basically two things. The first is, are you going to help somebody modernize by hand or are you going to help them with AI?
yeah,
And if you're doing it with AI, you're going to do this about uh, 6 months faster than your competition and 10% of the cost compared to your competition. And most importantly, because you've got those requirements, whatever modernization you're doing is much less likely to have mistakes in it, which is the
yeah.
number one problem that happens when most organizations try to modernize.
Yeah, I would have to think that this is it a difficult sale when you walk in the door? Or is this something like people are just like, hey, we've had this problem. It's just a nuisance constantly. It's expensive. We have no solution except to, patch the hole in the ceiling when the rainwater comes in type of thing. Or are they just like, hey, I get system integrators calling me every day pitching business. How are you any different as an application developer?
Yeah, great question. So we actually find that enterprises tend to have that former attitude where they are hungry for help in trying to figure out their
Okay.
modernization states. The kinds of questions we often get are first, understanding how CoreStory differentiates from really the foundation model providers. And the foundation models, of course, would like to be able to solve this problem. Foundation models, I mean, Claude,
Hmm.
Anthropic, and Codex
Right.
from AI, and all the big folk.
Sure.
Look, those tools are great at writing code, small amounts of code. They're great at understanding small amounts of code, but they really struggle when it comes to real world, large scale systems. And we hear this consistently from our customers that we tried to use GPT-5 to address this problem, or GPT-4 in the old days, and we found that we got a 20% success rate, and that makes sense. Those systems are very good at writing brand new code according to plans. When you have detailed specs, they struggle without having clear specifications on real world code bases. And it's not a big surprise because if you think about how human engineers work best when they have clear requirements.
Yeah.
It's not a
Yeah.
surprise that software agents are going to be any different.
Well, plus you have to have the ability to trust the response that you're getting back. I mean, it's not like you have a team that's been there for 10 years, and they know the history and the technology and, it's the fact is like half these people are gone. This could have been 20 years of or even larger of legacy development. And so whoever's there today is trying to discover what even happened in the past many, many years ago. And so how do you even trust that the AI is giving you the right, the right response back? Providing the right solution for your document in the correct way if you're not really even sure what the history was. So I think that's part of the problem when we over rely, and even with just a person just using, like you said, ChatGPT 5. Unless you really know what you're looking for, you're just trusting the response. And so often it really isn't the optimal solution to what you're looking for. And that is very frustrating.
You've nailed some of the challenges that I
Yeah.
think people who have not looked at this problem don't appreciate, that people end up encountering. We spend a lot of our time thinking about trust and provability, how you can verify accuracy and quality, how you can maintain a high degree of proof on whatever specification and requirements we give. Often we end up partnering with the teams inside the organizations that are concerned with understanding existing code bases and who are developing expertise around that. And for those groups, it actually can be a radical accelerant in their ability to move through these systems. Generally, our customers cite something like a 300% ROI gain in terms of the time
Wow.
savings, which is pretty
Yeah.
good. And that's a healthy boost in those folks day to day.
There needs to be an emotional ROI that's also viewed, because if you've ever talked to a CTO, this is the kind of stuff where you're up at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, and it's not just about dollars, right? But it's about the old peace of mind issue. After a while, it becomes an issue.
There's two different emotional responses I like to hear about.
Yeah.
From our CIO and CTO customers, and of course from the directors and VPs who end up rolling out CoreStory inside their organizations. The first one is the one that you mentioned, which is this helps me sleep better at night
Yeah.
because I did not know how I was going to get through this modernization effort or this risk of high priority features and tickets that are blocking revenue and blocking us from getting uptime. There have been some very famous failures that keep happening about exactly this issue in tech debt on legacy systems. Um, I'll tell you one in a minute that just was in the news today. Um,
Okay.
and the second, and we can help those folks sleep better at night, right? They can get through the modernization faster, and they can move through this process quicker. The other one that's really, I think, topical today is this idea that organizations need to see AI ROI wins, and everyone is under pressure to get more done with AI.
Right.
Uh, and there is a palpable sense people fear that they're going to be left behind if they don't adopt AI based software development life cycles. And uh, my favorite kind of call to get from a customer is, we needed an AI win and you really delivered one.
Wow.
And because it's dollars and cents, right? One of the emerging trends we see is folks who have bought um, a bunch of AI tooling for software development, right? Some of the best understood and best loved coding agents in the world, with whom we have partnered in many cases. And those agents sometimes do not deliver the expected yield in terms of productivity. So folks ask, well, is this an adoption problem? Is it a capability problem in the model? Actually, we believe it's a specification problem. When you put CoreStory in, when you turn on our agent, when you give the requirements into those agents, suddenly those agents perform a lot better. They start solving more tickets, they can solve more complex tickets, and you get higher yield from your existing investments on those. And so that's a clear example of what we call an AI win, where somebody got a lot more done on every sprint on maintaining a legacy system using CoreStory.
Yeah, I love that. I think today, if I ever talk to any CEOs of every different level, they feel that, like you said, in the tech world, it's obvious. Like we live in this bubble here in San Francisco, but for so many others, I think every CEO says, "I got to get into AI. I have no idea where to even start." There's this sense of pressure that everybody's behind, even an individual just working in a company. At least I feel the pressure every day of having to learn more and more, and the world is changing so quick, and I know I'll be left behind. So, I think that's kind of something that everybody feels at every level, and I'm sure at the enterprise level, having that big AI win, at least if it's a CTO, can take that back to the CEO and say, look at what we've discovered. And it's not a vaporware. It's something that's really real, solving a problem that does keep us up at night and can make us look terrible. Stop those crisis moments, right? The next fire alarm, essentially.
Those are the places where products like CoreStory can make the biggest difference.
Yeah.
Obviously, there is this sense for everybody in San Francisco and outside, that there's a gulf that's emerging between groups that are successfully going AI first in a lot of their practices, and
Yeah.
groups that are lagging in this. And I see it in the pace of development teams in particular, who are successfully adopting AI into their workflow, and ones who are struggling. And the reason that often folks struggle is simply because it is non-obvious how you adopt these technologies. The
Yeah.
practice of what is sometimes called spec-driven development, using a spec as the basis for how you build, a little bit like test-driven development. It's not the obvious way that most people like to build. Most folks like to build with the methodologies that have gotten us to this point, which are things like Agile, or things like waterfall, right before
Yeah.
that. And spec-driven development has some of the ideas in common, but a lot of it is about delegation to agents and putting up guardrails on agents,
Right.
and good specs and requirements that agents can work with. All
Now,
of which is hard to figure out.
now, did you come up with the phrase living spec? Was that your idea?
We call it the living PRD and the living
Okay.
spec. Yeah, we do
Yeah.
talk about that. That is a notion that we introduced into the market, and I'll tell you what it means.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people say, "Well, look, I wrote a spec, I wrote a design document, I wrote a PRD, but I wrote those, 10 years ago when we started this project. It's out of date now." Well, look, that's actually the old way of building. Today, the notion that we propose and that we recommend people follow is what we call a living specification. What that means is that even as your code base changes over time, your specification should change in real time to match that code base. So that at any given time, you have this existing complete reference list that explains every behavior of your code base, even as that code base changes. And of course, in the AI era, you can keep these two things in sync really easily, because at least in CoreStory, every time you push a change up to your code base, your specification updates. So the reason that's useful is this really um, now obvious thing that uh, code is becoming cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to produce. The spec is the part that tells agents and humans how to generate that code. And so as
Right.
long as your spec is up to date, you can always future-proof your application against whatever the framework or language du jour happens to be,
Yeah.
because you'll always have an updated spec that you can consult and that you can use to drive the behavior of your agents or to ask questions about your application stack. So the notion of a living spec, as we see it, is this idea that just like you've got this Git repository that represents all of your code, you'll have a spec that is attached to your code base and attached to your applications in perpetuity that explains what it does to agents, to your organization, to your business, and helps you build anything that you need to build on top of that code base.
Yeah, you had mentioned I look at it as the speed of the development of the code is changing so dramatically. And if it's accelerating at a certain pace and you're falling behind in documenting what what that code looks like and how it interacts, and that gap could widen very, very quickly in the future.
It's
So I
very
could see so you need something that's really evolving, I guess you could say in real time, but it's going to be something beyond human time very quickly.
well, CIOs have gotten to the idea, maybe the false idea today, that you need to modernize your system every 5 years and it's just a permanent
Right.
tax that you pay. The reality is that this might be the last wave of modernization that people need to do ever, because once you've got a spec attached and you've gone from an AI incomprehensible software code base to an AI native code base via that spec, you can do a lot more. And as you
Yeah.
note, the speed that agents work on code bases means that organizations throwing lots of AI generated code into their code bases
Yeah.
have to in order to move at the pace they need to. And having that spec available is one of the only ways you can guarantee that you know what all that code is doing at any given time.
So, all right, let's hear about this cool story from yesterday.
Well, everyone watched this thing, right? With this is not a core story story, but it's one that core story could have prevented. It was very sad. It was the Sonder Marriott
Oh
breakup.
my gosh. Heard
Uh,
about that in real time.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
you weren't booked there, but
No,
yeah.
I actually am the opposite. We compete with them in another business.
Well,
So, oh, and I love the fact that they didn't go to chapter 11, they went into chapter 7. I guess I'm from that old school, if somebody's drowning, shove a fire hose down their throat. Chapter
well,
7, yeah, I
the,
told my partner, I said, "Hey, it's chapter 7. They're gonna be liquidated. It's over."
the remarkable thing, if you look at why did
Yeah,
this happen, right? Because look, it was a good product, and they had a
yeah.
good partner in Marriott. The number one cause that they attributed this to was a failure to integrate the software systems between Saunders systems, which were written over the last 10 years, with
Yeah.
Marriott booking systems, which were written over the last 20 years. And this is a classic example of a
Wow.
problem that was fully avoidable if those groups had followed anything like an AI based approach for understanding the two legacy systems and figuring out the fast path to connect them. And look, in their defense, without AI and without modern technologies, it is a conventionally difficult problem to integrate
Yeah.
two legacy systems together. Of course, with AI, it is a radically simpler problem.
Alright. So
Uh,
we have a case study for your perfect ICP then, right?
well, it's actually if you look at who uses CoreStory today,
Yeah.
in addition to the global system integrators with whom we partner, we also look at folks who are in similar industries. So it is often groups who are inside places like hospitality, retail, logistics, manufacturing, finance, health, insurance, which is a massive stack of COBOL almost everywhere, and then government,
Yeah.
which, of course, one of the groups that is most important for us as a organization and a society to help modernize. And so
Yeah.
those are some of the examples of where we see the biggest needs, and it's because those are groups that end up reliant on legacy systems for their revenue streams in ways they don't always anticipate.
I wonder if, the large investment banks would see value in this as part of their diligence up front for these large mergers, longstanding legacy systems that are completely different, like 2 different banks merging together, two different, healthcare systems merging together, and so on.
We actually do see this use case, believe it or
Yeah.
not. And it's often because the kinds of questions that analysts like to ask during diligence are expressed in English. And the only data points they get when they are doing this kind of diligence are expressed in code,
Yeah.
meaning they will be given a bunch of code systems, right? A bunch of repos, and they'll have to bring in a consulting team or a technical expert to hope that they captured these questions about, hey, is there any IP infringement in this particular system? Or is there an incompatibility between system A and system B? And historically, diligence teams would need to go in and talk to experts. The experts would need to discuss with each other and then pour through the code and hope that they found what they were looking for. But really,
Yeah.
it's a straightforward question. Once you've translated those code bases into specs, into
Hmm.
requirements, you can ask using an ordinary language model, hey, show me the places where this code base contains items that are GPL licensed, right? And that is actually a simple query once you've got the spec out there. Or show me where these two systems would integrate, and show me got incompatibility in a fundamental way.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like there's so many directions you guys to go could go as a startup. It's really just picking, like I said, that right ICP, having the right core story, as we would say, and going in and making the pitch. Sounds like it's a really big opportunity for you. I really
We
believe
are
that.
excited by the
Yeah.
scope of what customers have brought us in terms of use cases. We're also excited by the potential for the market, and we're excited by what our partners have been able to take us into as well. I think in many cases, because we have driven partnerships both with coding agents and with system integrators who are all very smart about this problem space, there are great ways for us to be able to scale out into industries that are in real need right now of finding solutions like this.
Yeah, so that's, I was thinking the other day about, international mergers as well. When you've got code for companies where you're buying, let's say the most obvious would be like, an American company buying a Chinese company buying or Korean, where the languages and the way they think about code design is potentially very different. I would think that AI would, in that particular case, really be able to be a differentiator in understanding that.
I think there's an interesting possibility you raise there. Certainly, when you're looking at organizations that get increasing groups of
Mhm.
disparate assets, the
Yeah.
amount of what they would consider legacy code or inherited code that was built by people who are not part of the organization or where there's not existing processes to maintain them just
Yeah.
continues to go up. So there are some footprints there where we've seen some multinational groups who have very large portfolios ask us exactly this kind of question. So it's interesting to think about.
Now is your price structure without too many details, is this similar to like at the old software enterprise model? You go in and try to build it over a number of years, or what does the structure look like generally
No,
for
we
this?
actually follow the same pattern as almost all of the rest of our peers in the AI industry, which is that it is consumption based.
Okay.
So the more tokens that you use, or the more
Mm,
credits that you use, based on the more lines of code that you turn into specs, the more that
mm,
you pay. And it's typically on a recurring basis because almost everyone says we want to keep processing more and more code. So in that way, we've been able to, I think, get to a model that actually drives a pretty high return for
yeah.
folks. It's because credits and tokens are cheap relative to the extreme effort that you would go through to read through a code base piece by piece, and the extreme upside you get from getting
Yeah.
faster development cycles or ultimately replatforming. Generally, we aim for a substantive ROI for customers, and we do measure that
Awesome.
assertively when we start out. But it's not a multi-year process; it is a multi-week process
Wow.
going into an enterprise.
Well, that is the great thing about, constantly in real time always working. If the agents are constantly changing things, then you have to constantly have information updated. So it becomes almost like a must have as opposed to a nice to have. It just goes on in perpetuity, I'm imagining.
I think that's how many of the
Yeah.
software development processes that we all like in sort of the last generation of software have worked, right? So continuous integration systems, or even our uh, code processing and packaging systems, those all run on their own. And I think those have been great productivity gains for developers in that era. So the new analog of this is going to be, agents working as a backlog emerges and human beings checking the work, supervising, making sure they're making the right decisions, and really being informed by what's happening by this pool of interns, so
All
to
right.
speak.
So you just raised this wonderful Series A last month. What's the next big milestone for the company? The big home run for you over the next 12 months?
Okay, great question.
Yeah.
So as we think about where we are headed as a company, Core Story is really about three things, right? Number one is can we make sure that more and more organizations inside the enterprise are able to adopt spec-driven development, living specifications, and CoreStory as a main mechanism to accelerate their modernization, to understand their existing code estates, and to speed up the process of software development using software agents. We count that based on the metrics that we see for how many uh, end users have adopted the solution, in how many repos and teams inside those organizations, and of course, how much productivity gain are they seeing in terms of how well they're able to replatform, modernize, capture requirements, or speed up development. That's number one. And so we are in a uh, evangelical mode, so to speak, to make sure that as many people can hear the good word of spec-driven development, core story, because it is legitimately a transformative way for teams to start thinking about modernizing their code or
Yeah.
understanding their code better. The second piece, of course, is that we continue to drive out, I think, very strong relationships with organizations that are tasked with dealing with the groups of legacy code bases that are out there. And so those are the hardworking system integrators that are trying to help organizations modernize at scale, and the folks who are really driving change management inside these organizations to help educate them on what solutions are available to accelerate that process. And we're happy to partner with some of the best ones in the world who are really teaching folks inside the enterprise about how they should be adopting solutions like Core Story to accelerate the process of modernization. Then, of course, the third thing, which is, can we actually continue to knock it out of the park on quality, on speed, and on returns for our own customers? And that's something where we want to make sure that we are always upfront in our own benchmarks and in the public benchmark.
Awesome, awesome. Well, let's jump to something kind of fun because, living out here in the Bay Area, if you go to any events and you meet all these wonderful young people, they're going to change the world, and they haven't had funding yet. And they're talking about various incubators. Um, I know you had an experience with Y Combinator. I'd love for you to share kind of what that was like and what your big takeaways were and how that maybe changed how you thought about how you started up companies and built teams and built products after that experience.
Well, this is one of my favorite topics, actually, because it's difficult if you live in the Bay Area to miss the impact that Y Combinator has had,
Yeah,
both on the scientific process of startup creation and on the cultural transformation for the better, in my opinion, that it's brought to San Francisco and to the Bay Area,
yeah,
where entrepreneurship has become, I think, a much more respectable career path, and also one that is more likely to be one that results in favorable outcomes for the world. So, I did Y Combinator in one of the early batches during my first company, LeadGenius. Um, I think that the premise, of course, was that you could take uh, smart technical people and teach them business faster than you could
yeah,
take smart business people and teach them tech. And I think it is a transformative experience for folks who have never run a company at all, let alone a hypergrowth company. The main pieces that you will be left with going through Y Combinator are an appreciation for what matters in scaling up an organization, and I think in what matters when you are trying to understand how to create value for the world. The core ethos of Y Combinator is this notion of making something people want, which is one of the hardest things to get right building a startup, given all
yeah.
the things that can distract you. And it's still true because once you've solved a real problem for someone, that's the core of what running an enterprise is about.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so Lead Genius actually came out of that experience. So a lot of people, Y Combinator has the successes, but obviously has those successes, those experiences that were not what we had deemed as financial successes for companies. Is in the end, it's a giant portfolio along with the systems and the learned experiences come out of that. But based on what you're saying is, no matter no matter what the experience is, whether it leads to a great outcome with future private investment funding and the big success, or an experience that it doesn't quite work out the way you wanted, but you still want to be an entrepreneur one day. It's almost like a combination of the live experience with going back to a university or school experience for entrepreneurship. So either way, win or lose. As we used to say in wrestling, you either win or learn. Sounds like going to Y Combinator, certainly that would be the takeaway for you either way. So a no
Well,
lose at the
I
end.
would say if you're gonna start a startup, especially one that's going to go into Combinator, you should, go in to win. Certainly, it is an opportunity to dedicate yourself, with a bunch of very smart people to getting to an outstanding outcome, and
Yeah,
I would also say that, when you look at the success rates the successes that have come out of Y Combinator, these are all companies, technologies, and products that we
it's
all
incredible.
use all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
What a massive impact on the world, and I think that when you think about, going in there, if you were considering it as somebody who is going to launch a startup or who is running a startup, that's really what you should be after.
yeah.
Think about the opportunity that you have to, accelerate what you are doing, and, swing for the fences. And, of course, that's an approach that, uh I endorse for,
Yeah,
that time that you get to spend. And many people go back through Y Combinator multiple times, actually, on multiple
yeah.
startups, because the experience is so unique and powerful. And it does have elements of a university in the sense that there's a very strong and, honestly, motivated and engaged alumni community, which is one thing that I think has been very difficult for almost any other,
Well,
institution
yeah.
in the Valley to replicate.
Yeah, I think it's also for a lot of people that are they're more on the product side, development side. Maybe they don't have the more outgoing personality. They're not natural network builders. Being put into an environment where you can make those connections or to force to make those connections is probably very, very valuable. I'm guessing you made a bunch of friends through that process too, because so many of the people you come in contact with are in a mentoring type of role that naturally builds that affinity towards each other.
I think it's inevitable, and,
Yeah,
actually, I am still, good friends with many of the people from, my Y Combinator batch,
yeah,
who have all gone on to do amazing things, some with their Y Combinator companies and some in other, sort of, adventures in life, but, I'd also say I've got many more friends and peers that I've made through the Y Combinator, network,
yeah.
that are basically all working together for this common goal of can we help each other and help make the world a better place through the action here of building these technology companies.
Well, I wanted to end with a quick question, which is about perspective, because people ask me this question all the time, whether it's just a friends or coworkers or people that I happen to just come across, clients. But what's the one thing that you're most excited about the future? I'm wearing a shirt from a podcast called "The Future Looks Bright." I really do feel that way. I think today is the greatest time in history to live. It's the greatest transformation that the world has ever seen, and I'm just happy to be here and be a part of it. That's my personal view. What's the thing that you are most optimistic about for the future?
I think it is a remarkably unique time to be building and running a company of any kind, let alone an AI company. I am particularly bullish on the upside that we can have from artificial intelligence. Both in sort of the work that we are doing, which is helping in this sort of deep morass of enterprise systems that we all rely on, but really for the potential to uplift all of our lives and experiences. We've all had this experience for, I think, the last couple of years of being able to work through systems like ChatGPT that are just radically better ways to interact
Yeah.
with the world's
Waymo.
sure. And I think that these are experiences that, back when I was a PhD student, we just dreamed about, right? And we said, why do we think AI is so cool and everyone else doesn't? And it's fantastic to see this stuff actually come to life. And I am, at my core, a technology optimist for what is very possible now for the first time in terms of what we can do with the set of tools that have become available. And so that
Yeah.
is a reason to be very optimistic about where we can go.
And that's also a reason for an entrepreneur or wannabe entrepreneur, one-up startup guy to come to the San Francisco Bay Area for everything that you read on television, all the kind of chaos and stuff on the news. In technology, I feel that sense of optimism is the greatest kind of value that the Silicon Valley kind of holds dear. everybody you talk to who's involved in the startup world is doing it because they want to build something that makes a positive impact. And that enthusiasm and optimism is just, it's invigorating. And that's why I love what I do, working with all these startup companies, helping them grow their teams, become successful, because I feel like I can make an impact by helping them. And that seems to be the one continuity, no matter where they came from. Everybody wants to do something good for the world. And you just can't quite understand that until you come here and start meeting people, going to events, having coffee, having these fun podcast discussions. And that's what, it really excites you to wake up every day and look at the world as a sunny day.
It's very difficult unless you've been to San Francisco and been in the scene, to understand the fundamental creativity that
Yeah.
undergirds all of the interactions here. There's also a tolerance for weirdness, of course, and a positive
It's always
energy.
been that way. Yeah.
All connected, right? People help each other out here in a way that's very fundamental to our culture and ethos.
Yes.
And it's infused in the last couple of years, especially with the energy that has come out of AI for making people uh, excited again about going out into the world and doing big things. And so that makes it a really fun time to be here
It's
physically.
also exciting when you're in that kind of fervor of where the money's being dispersed. That's also fun for a while too, and it has its ups and downs. But that's another exciting thing. I think the investor community and certainly the large corporations see the opportunity here, and they're investing so much money into it, as well as having that positive attitude. So come on out if you're if you're a large company with huge legacy systems. I know you haven't slept in many days. I guess it's the CTO or CIO or whomever the organization. We'll say the whole C-suite is up at night. You've got to talk to Anand. And for would-be startup folks, come out here, get involved in kind of our whole ecosystem, experience that energy that we're talking about, attend those meetings, and try to get your spot in Y Combinator for sure. And Anand, it was awesome having you. If somebody wants to reach out to you or your team, what is the best way to find you guys?
You can check us out online at corestory.ai. You can also drop us a note. You can drop me a note directly. My first name, Anand, at corestory.ai. I'd be excited to chat with anyone we can help out.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate it. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thanks so much, Tim.
Cheers. The Startup Innovators podcast is provided by MatchStar Venture Search. If you are interested in any of our executive roles or need help sourcing world-class talent for your company, check out our website at matchstar.com.